Hey there, today we're going to be discussing something that might take a little bit longish to explain, so apologies if this video is unreasonably long by the end of it, but we're going to be discussing the waves of feminism. These days, the concept of waves of feminism outside of feminist circles is usually used as its own variation of the no true Scotsman fallacy. Whenever someone like me comes along and says all feminism is cancer, and for at least the vast majority of the existence of the term has been entirely cancer for decades and decades. And I still hold by that. And I, used to be under some misconceptions that feminism sort of was started in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, mostly the 60s. It is actually more accurate, and it's fair to say that I was wrong, that no, feminism has been around for about 200 years almost. It actually was a term that was coined actually about 170 years ago by some French retard. And though the term was not really in vogue in America until the 1960s, 1950s or so, it is somewhat accurate to describe the suffragettes, which I used to say were not feminists. It might actually be accurate to say that they were, because feminism was used as a phrase in America as early as like 1910. Now, I don't know necessarily if many of the people claimed by feminism would have called themselves feminists, but it does actually remain that the first wave of feminism, I guess in the West, could be explained as starting somewhere in the late 1800s, and in America, somewhere about the early 1900s. Now, what the first wave is considered is just about everything up till about 1950. And that was suffragettes, voting rights, property rights. And then the 1960s came along, and this is where the feminist became inextricably tied to communists, Marxists, leftist radicals, and whatnot. And this, the start of the poisonous feminism, is not what some people would like to pretend with the creation of Tumblr, but started in the 60s. People like Valerie Solanas, the writer of the Scum Manifesto, the hashtag Kill All Men predates Twitter by quite a lot, let me tell you. And a lot of the crotchety old feminists you might see creeping around on the BBC got their start around this time. And this is why crotchety old feminists like Gloria Steinem and Julie Bindel, as old as they are every bit as cancerous as your average pink or red-haired freak on Tumblr, is because feminist cancer has existed for at least that long. Now, here's where we start to get to the interesting part, because we get to our little no true Scotsman fallacy that you hear a lot of. Oh no, feminist is good, it's just third wave feminists, or feminists are good, it's just fourth wave feminists, or feminists are good, but here's, wave number 127 and they're the only bad ones. It becomes its own little piece of plausible deniability. And what I know from having hundreds of short little exchanges with feminists over the past 3 years is that there's nothing a feminist likes more than plausible deniability. Any feminist that does anything bad is not a true feminist. In fact, what I've compiled from all the usage of no true Scotsman fallacies by feminists throughout these past few years is that the only real feminist is an egalitarian like me. So I'm actually the only real feminist here. And and you find out that the more sane a feminist is, the less evidence that they ever took any sort of feminist theory class in college. In fact, it seems that the less educated on feminist history, theory, and philosophy that a person is, the less likely that they're a psychotic piece of shit. And the more that they are, the more likely you're going to see them LARPing as a revolutionary in a Berkeley riot, the more that they've taken feminist courses in college. See, right around the third wave, which is, I guess, dated at somewhere around the 1980s, we finally ended, rape culture, marital rape, reproductive rights, voting rights, property rights, basically everything you can think of as a legitimate grievance a feminist might have has all been sorted out by this point. So where do they go from there? This is the start of the feminists starting to infect everything and try to take over and take credit for everything. So right about the time that feminists said, we ran out of shit, hey, gay rights, can we take your shit? And then they moved into, hey, black people, are you still feeling like you're not getting along with the men? Well, now black people, that's feminist stuff. That's our stuff now. We need more shit to complain about. We need more shit to be angry at. So we got all our shit sorted out, but we're still in an offense culture, and we need to be offended. So the start of their infecting of other rights groups, legitimate or otherwise, started then and got worse and worse and worse. And this was also right about the time where feminism hit a major fracturing. See, by and large, I think with probably quite a few exceptions, but to the best of my knowledge, the majority of feminism up until the 1980s was sex positive. But of course, that women were not sexually really liberated culturally, even if they might have been more or less, depending on what decade you're looking at, legally sexually liberated. They certainly weren't completely until around the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. So it is, very reasonable to consider that feminism was very sex positive up until this major fracturing point, the start of the third wave, so to speak. And this is where we started getting the whole death objectifying and stare rape and and catcalling is rape and all the man spreading. All this shit actually started a good 30 years ago. Because there was apparently a literally big, ugly knockdown political and philosophical schism in feminism. And to the best of my knowledge, at least over the past 30 years, the sex-negative feminists won that shit hardcore. Because the what do you call it? The stereotype of a can't get laid, ugly, man-hating, jealous feminist who doesn't just loathe the men that she can't have, but loathes the women that can still get them. This was probably the start of the real negative press, I think, around feminism as well. Is that, most people just didn't pay them any mind. But once it was clear that there was a very jealous and envious and aggressive, grasping, whinging, pessimistic, negative, very unpalatable and intolerable fucking nature to feminism, was, I think, really the start of when people really started to not like feminists at all. Because that was when, if it might be unfair of me to say that feminism was toxic in the 1960s, when it at least half was, by the 1980s, it was all bad news. So now we get to this major divide, which I find fascinating, and my impetus for making this video. I guess, sorry to get to the big closer so late. But I'm fascinated by this No True Scotsman I keep mentioning. It's just this wave feminist. Because what I was fascinated with is the No True Scotsman that I'd been hearing since 2014, when I first started being really interested in this subject. It was third wave feminists are shit. But the second and first waves were, they were so great. And I'd never, gone and taken a feminist lecture course, and they're the only people who give a shit about this waves nonsense. Most of your average Facebook slacktivism, nicey nice egalitarian who doesn't know any better feminist, one of the two classes of feminist, the other being a radicalized, man-hating idiot, indoctrinated, full of fucking pseudo-Marxist and even outright communist, anarchist, fucking crazy shit in college. Even the egalitarian slacktivist feminist doesn't have any concept of this shit, because this is sort of a self-chronicled thing, the waves of feminism, that only these academic, toxic waste fucking feminists actually give a shit about. So I was confused how I kept hearing this parroted and repeated. by people who obviously didn't understand it, and often would word in a question like, isn't it only third wave feminists who are bad? Nobody cares about them. They're not real feminists after all. No real feminist eats their porridge hot or cold or whatever the fuck the line is for true Scotsman. And then I've been hearing recently, it's only fourth wave feminists that are bad, and I was confused. So I go and I look up third wave feminism, and everything that the modern day feminist does that is obnoxious and disturbing, the fat acceptance movement, the formulation of queer as a fake term of an oppression that was a word stolen from gay people who were an actual oppressed group, and then used to mean this sort of blanket term for people who make up shit all the time, like gray aces and non-gender binary freaks, otherkin. That was third wave. Started in the late 80s and continues to this day. Fat acceptance, same thing. Sex negative, anti-free sexual expression of women, anti-sexuality in marketing or in entertainment, So, yeah, I was like, okay, so then who the fuck are these fourth wave feminists? And I look up this fourth wave shit, and it is an entirely hypothetical fucking wave that basically appears to be third wave feminists trying to pretend like they aren't the new cutting edge of human fucking garbage. So everything I just described to you as the hallmarks and absolute indicators of a third wave feminist completely apply to fourth wave feminists. There's your first red flag. The next is that apparently some feminist about 10 years ago wanted to try to say, feminism plus spirituality is fourth wave feminist, and nobody fucking listened to her. And then some people say, fourth wave feminism starts around 2008. Well, that doesn't appear to be the case, because modern feminists appear to perfectly fall into the category of third wave feminists. So why would there be an arbitrary break-off except for more plausible deniability? And then the other shit was just the even more ludicrous thing, the focus on gender binary and gender roles, and the rejection of biological reality and sexual dimorphism appears to be the only thing that seems to be anything that could be described a unique hallmark of fourth wave feminism, despite that being another issue of third wave feminism. So, what you have here is an explanation of the three waves. You got your people who actually didn't have equal rights, and then there's the people who didn't think there was adequate legal protection, the ability to prosecute for things like marital rape and stuff that was around the 40s, 50s, and 60s of second wave feminism, which at least still had a few grasping straws of legitimacy to it. And then you get from late 1970s, 1980s essentially on, is all illegitimate, selfish, egotistical, fucking science denialist asshole feminist. So there you go. There's your concrete proof that, maybe it's not as long as I've said. I've said feminism has been an absolute pile of festering dog shit for 3/4 of a century. Maybe that's not exactly true. But you can say without a doubt that for 35 years, feminism has been complete and utter cancer. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Long-ass video, I know, but there's no need to go on any longer. Just remember that whenever they say, this wave, that wave, first of all, the feminists don't even agree amongst themselves what 100% defines their wave. I guess my citation for this is I looked most of this shit up on Wikipedia, which in this case is a good source, because if there's anybody who polices the fuck out of Wikipedia to the point where they vandalize shit of groups that are opposed to feminists, it would be feminists. Feminists are very meticulous about Wikipedia upkeep, so I thought, why not get the word from the horse's mouth? Thanks for watching.